Welcome to Parenting Differently, where we leave behind the old way of parenting and allow the gifts of motherhood to raise us. Different to how maybe we were raised, different to how society is telling us to raise our kids, maybe even different to how we expected we would raise them. Just different. I'm your host, Anya Simmons. I'm a mum of two big people, a trained British nanny, a yoga teacher. I can also say I'm an author. My book's coming out in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, sorry, not quite that close, called Parenting from This Place. And I thought going into parenting would just be easy, having trained as a nanny. It was just going to be that next step. And I was not prepared for how hard it was to parent my two little people and how really we were being raised together. You know, the gifts from them of me really doing my work, my healing, and more self-awareness, and the gifts back to them of me leaning back and letting it be their journey. So I'm very excited to welcome my guest for today, Rosalia Rivera, an abuse prevention expert and somebody that everybody who is watching or listening to this as a parent, go find her, go seek her out. She's a consent educator, speaker, and a podcast host of Consent Parenting, podcast about consent. And her work is so pertinent in the world in general, and especially at this time. So you'll have all her details at the end there, but welcome, Rosalia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So we'll start with the first question in our Parenting Differently podcast. Who are you and who are you parenting?
So I'm a Latina, a mother of three, and I'm really here on a mission to educate and empower parents, particularly those who are survivors themselves. I'm a survivor, but I also consider myself a thriver and a warrior. And I'm on a mission to eradicate child sexual abuse and to dismantle the taboo around it, for the sake of breaking cycles and empowering my own three children who are a gift and are always teaching me about letting go of control, which was something I was raised with. And so I always consider myself reparenting myself as well through the process, because there were wonderful things about my childhood, but also a lot of really negative habits that, my mother was raised with, that her mother was raised with, and on and on. And so when I talk about breaking cycles, it's not just in terms of abuse, but also in terms of freedom for ourselves and our children. So that's the journey I'm on.
Powerful. Amazing. So you've kind of touched it already, but what are you uncovering more about yourself as a mom?
Yeah, so oh my goodness, every day is just such a emotional roller coaster, depending on the week, I guess. But it really, I think, comes down to realizing that a lot of the methods that my mother used to raise me were out of fear, just a lot of fear-based ways of mothering, and realizing how that shaped me and produced a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety, which I didn't really come to terms with until the last probably 5 years, since my oldest started going off into the world. You know, when they're little and you have so much control, right, over where they are and who's caring for them. And that can feel really great because you can keep them safe. But then they start getting to the age where they go off into the world a little bit more, and that produced so much more anxiety than I'd ever experienced. And I always joke that I have some degree of OCD, and that was really challenged. And so daily, it is something that I have to remind myself that I can't control everything, but I can do my best to communicate as much as possible and keep those lines open. Because I think those are, when it comes particularly to abuse prevention, communication is one of the strongest ways that we can prevent abuse from happening. So, learning how to be a better communicator, a better listener, and learning how to allow my children to flourish in their most authentic selves, because otherwise they'll spend their lifetime, much like I have, in trying to come back to figuring out who I am. And I feel like I finally am settling on that. And little by little allowing myself to be more authentically myself in public. And that's just what I want for my children. I want them to not have to struggle with that all their lives. I want it to just them to have those wings from day one. And so, yeah, that's where I'm always working on, is just letting go of the control as much as I can, obviously while keeping them safe, but giving them that ability to express themselves.
Yeah. And I think everybody needs to work on communicating and listening, right? And it comes more to a front in relationships and in parenting, right? And I think we all come at it from a place of wanting to kind of do our best. And then, but if you're not aware, if you're not going to do some of the work or realize where it's actually stemming from, like you say, your fear, like I had no idea that I was an anxious person. I had no idea that I was so full of fear, exactly in the area that you're talking about. Like I really believed only I could keep them safe.
Right.
And I really believed that, like I was watched their dad with them. And, we've been married now forever and he's, been a great father. But I would watch anybody and everybody. But and obviously there's a necessary part of that, right? An important part of that. But it was coming from fear. So that's all I'm passing on, not knowledge. And I think that's where what you're doing is so phenomenal, is we can adjust from our fear and get really educated and use that. I didn't have it, that stuff. We didn't. Really aging myself. We didn't have computers back then. I would, but it was really only going by instinct. And I was absolutely terrified of anything happening to them. But that was such a burden on myself, because I also lost the trust that let them learn within the safe boundaries, right? I didn't really want that. I wanted to just be like, you just stay with mommy will keep you safe,
right?
And ultimately that's my fear.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Trickling in.
Well, and growing up for me, I realized that I just wasn't given skills, and a lot of times we are so preoccupied with protecting that we don't educate. And if we're not educating, we're really doing our kids a disservice in the long term, because when I became a teenager, I didn't have any boundary skills or knowledge about consent. My mom didn't, so I don't necessarily blame her, but we now have so much more access. Like you said, I grew up in the 80s and 90s and we didn't have computers then. My mom certainly didn't have access to the information we have now. She's also a survivor, so she was also acting out of that fear and just wanting to keep us close, like the mother hen keeps the babies close and thinks that that's how you protect. But if you don't give them the ability to learn those skills and be educated about those things, then we're doing them a disservice in the long run. So I found myself in a lot of unsafe situations when I was older, which I didn't know how to get out of. And so that's a lot of what informs the work I do, is I don't want to prohibit my children from experiencing life and being social and, doing the activities, that we want them to be able to enjoy, because of our own fear of not wanting them out of our sight or letting go. And, so yeah, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah. And like you say, daily, it is. I remember it being a daily work.
Yeah. So it absolutely, we have to learn how to inform ourselves in a way that isn't so triggering, but is also empowering. And it's going to empower our children, because they will sense whatever it is, that energy that we portray, they pick it up.
Yeah. Like, yes. And do you feel too, I know this was important to me and had to work hard at finding it for myself, was this intuition part. There's a gut feeling that I don't know if I like that person, or I don't know, for just even in friendship. I'm not even talking about an abuser on this point, but like it, or you walk into a room and you're like, like that we get out of that so fast, or we make our kids come out of that really fast, right? By saying, no, you're not cold, no, you're not hungry, no, you're not this. Where these are, like you're saying, the skills of okay, I can trust that this feels odd, right? Or
Right.
that we can accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. We, if you look back at how you were raised, you had a lot of that discounted, right? It was
Oh yes.
invalidated. And so when we grow up, we don't know if we can actually trust that sense, that
Yes.
sixth sense that we have. And one of the strategies that I teach parents is to help their children really tune into their intuition so that they can learn to trust it and have that compass guide them.
Right.
Because when we get older, and particularly for anyone who is a survivor and has those fears, they have a really hard time distinguishing between, is it paranoia or is it actually my sixth sense talking to me, and what do I pay attention to? And a lot of times, because we think, oh, I'm being overly paranoid, we relax our guard at the wrong time. And on the
Right.
reverse, we may be overly sensitive to things that may not necessarily be, a danger sign. So one of the things that I really started doing in the last 5 years was meditating and learning how to quiet my mind and really tune in, and fine tuning that consistently has been tremendously helpful. And for some people, meditation can feel really hard. So in those situations, I always recommend working with a professional, like maybe a hypnotherapist or someone who can help guide you through that and help you develop a habit in a safe way. So that's another way to learn how to do that. But when we teach our children, we can really do that in simple ways by asking them, what do certain feelings feel like in their body? Because our bodies are constantly communicating, on so many different levels. And so when we're teaching children how to tune in from that young of an age and to act on those feelings, we really teach them to honor that intuition and to learn how to trust it. And it can help prevent a lot of situations.
Right, right, absolutely. Speaking my language, the whole
Mm-hmm.
meditation side. I was for a number of years the yoga teacher out of a hospital here for anxiety, kids with anxiety, young kids with anxiety and depression, and
Mm-hmm.
different sort of within that um, heading. And it was so fascinating for them, the breath work that could
Mm-hmm.
support, never mind poses and movement, but that ability to find something that just stops a minute so that you can listen, right? We've got all this
Yeah.
noise around us. So I fully,
Especially these days with kids,
oh,
being given so much, their attention span, right? We tend to say this child has ADHD, but maybe it was just the amount of content that they've been, uh, accessing or consuming. And they have the ability to focus. We just need to help them learn to do that,
yeah,
just like the media, helps them learn the opposite, we can
that's
help them
right.
to learn how to, tune
Gosh,
in. I think
yes.
it's a really valuable skill to develop.
And don't you think almost the best way is for us to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's being demonstrated, and then it can be encouraged and taught, right? Because I've definitely been in
100%.
different situations where we're like, well, I'm telling them to meditate and I'm telling them to do some stretches and I'm telling them, and you're like, how I don't learn that way. If someone's telling me, I tend to go, oh yeah, well, I won't.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
so yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
One of the things I've enjoyed doing is allowing my children, um, both to practice it with me if they choose. I never enforce it
Mm-hmm.
on them, but they've seen me, in the morning I get up and I'm sitting on my bed, and if they see me in a meditation pose, they know, okay, mommy's meditating. And sometimes they'll choose to want to join in, and other
Mm-hmm.
times they just will, okay, I'll come back later. So they see the practice, and just in general, it's a great reset for their nervous system
Gosh,
too.
yes,
So there's just so
absolutely.
many benefits.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. Okay, so in areas of your parenting and parenting differently, when you mess up as we all do. I'm assuming you do maybe too. And you
Mm-hmm.
shout or you scream or you've said no and you're just nasty, on those days. I'm interested, how do you repair that? What does it work for you? How
Mm.
do you repair it for yourself in that release of guilt, forgiveness for yourself, and then make it a little better for those other
Yeah.
people?
And that's happened many times.
Okay, good. I always
Um,
think that people look at me like, I don't mess up.
yeah, no, there's a lot of, initially there would be a lot of guilt. Many years ago, I've learned how to come back from it, in healthier ways. But in the beginning, it was just a lot of, negative self-talk. Why did I do that? I'm repeating patterns I didn't, don't want.
Right.
And just like beating yourself up. And so I really give myself a lot more compassion now.
Fantastic.
Um, and I tell them, probably about a month ago, or maybe a little bit longer, but the beginning of the year, I think I remember there was a moment where it was like the end of the day. I was exhausted. The kids were I have three young boys and they get very rambunctious
Yes.
at bedtime, like the worst
Right.
possible time. And I try to do activities that will, kind of tire them out before bedtime. But this night they were just like
Wild.
nonstop.
Yeah.
And I was just really tired and they just were not cooperating. And I just snapped. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, feeling really bad because I could tell, first of all, they were having a great time.
Right.
And you feel like, the most horrible person, like raining on the parade, right? And so it was probably like one of those where it's like way overreacting to the
Mm-hmm.
situation. But I realized, a few things. One is it was a bad part of my cycle. So, knowing that my energy was very different at that time of my cycle, and then also recognizing it was just a really long day and I was just really frustrated about whatever it was that had nothing to do with
Sure.
my kids.
Right.
And in that moment I thought, okay, I could apologize right away and just try to smooth things over really quickly, but that didn't feel authentic either. And I just stayed quiet for a moment. I think the kids realized, like, uh-oh, we pushed mommy over the edge. And so they got quiet and I could tell that the mood was like, she's really mad and this was not, like this was different.
Mm-hmm.
And I just stayed quiet for a minute and I did some deep breathing, probably loud enough that they could hear me breathing. And I said, I just need a minute, guys. Okay, just mommy just needs a minute. And I'm going to try to calm myself down. So I took the time and probably spent about a minute just really calming my nervous system, thinking about how I wanted to respond, and also feeling really crappy about um, the fact that I almost didn't even want to apologize because I felt so righteous about the fact that,
Sure. Yeah.
they should be listening,
My God, I've said this 1,000
Yeah,
times.
and it's
Yes.
like there was still like some semblance of anger. And so I said, I really need to like just wait until this passes. And I think it was like maybe a minute or two later where I felt composed enough and I apologized and I said, it's not okay for me to yell. And, I'm the grown up here and I, do have emotions too. And I was really tired today. And I explained to them,
Mm-hmm.
and they understand also the concept of a menstrual cycle. So they know, I will mention it to them like, guys, I'm really tired today. Usually I'll preempt it in the day at some point. But so they understood. And I said, I'm really tired. I'm also, at this time of my cycle. So I'm just extra sensitive. And, and I feel like I've said this many times and you're not respecting,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm asking you. And but ultimately, I said, ultimately, I need to apologize because that wasn't okay. And I'm going to do better. I'm working on doing better. And you guys didn't deserve me yelling like that. And I didn't ask for I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ask them to forgive me because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that has to be something that they naturally want to do. I don't want to ask it and then they feel like obligated to
It's
forgive
like that,
me.
I'm sorry. When you don't really
Yeah.
mean it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I let that sink in and they all, kind of said, it's okay, mommy, we understand. And then my oldest said, yeah, we didn't listen, and we understand. And so like it was just this really great moment where I felt like everybody felt heard, everybody felt honored too, that I respected the fact that I asked them to talk, and if they ever feel angry, it's okay, but like to lose it, and we could get to a resolution before that. And so I was trying to model that.
I think you
And
totally did. You like
yeah,
aced that
and they
moment.
they felt really good, and I like, it was in that moment I personally felt like I grew as a parent. And like I went from feeling like horrible and angry at myself to feeling proud at the fact that I could really step up to that moment, and to acknowledge to my children who are younger than me, and to dismiss this whole idea of adultism where I'm the parent and I get to be mad,
Yeah,
and
old
threw that
way.
out the
Yeah.
window and like really walked that walk. So
Yeah, and you stood
yeah.
there. I love that part. That really stood out for me, that you stood there and took your breaths.
Hmm.
I forget that sometimes, and I think, okay, just leave the room, give yourself time out. And I'm like, wow, what about time in? And you just breathed. They're all like, what is she doing? Right? Because obviously it was different, but they really got to witness a change from a 10 to whatever you came to be like,
Right.
and this is how you did it, just through your breath. And
Yeah.
you chose to do that. Right,
Right.
the anger wasn't a conscious choice, it was just a like, wow, a reaction, right? So that's
Right.
phenomenal. That's
Yeah.
great learning.
Yeah. So, and anytime that they see me stop to breathe because it's about to get to that level, they realize, and I will just show like this is how I practice it, and what I'm always reminding them to practice. And so, I mean, modeling is, I think, the best way that we can really teach.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. Absolutely. So a slight different topic, that a question that I was interested in, and we're touching on. It's always amazing, these conversations, because it all sort of touches on all of it, right? In this whole
Hmm.
parenting world. So, how great or not great are you at dealing with your expectations of letting them be who they are? And I'll just clarify that a bit more. So, in terms of, if you see, say, one of them is really good at something, but they want nothing to do with that, they don't want to do whatever it could be. I mean, we could talk sports, or we could talk reading and writing, or playing an instrument. How open are you, or how do you deal with your own expectations when you want to go, come on, you could do really well at this, right? And just
Hmm.
let them, be who they are.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have had those challenges. I mean, I think all parents come across
Yeah.
that all the time, right? I mean, there's one, for example, that has to do with piano, and my oldest really shining in that department, like just really amazing, picks it up right away and enjoys it. And I had actually gotten him an app called Simply Piano because he seemed so interested, and
Right.
then started using it, but then the app was glitchy and he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just wanted to say, come on, like give it, keep trying, don't give up. Like here's a different, just use the sheet music. And he just like wanted nothing to do with it at that point. And I just gave it time. I think sometimes we have to think about ourselves as well, and think about how cyclical we are with things too. And so I would do other things like listen to piano music, and I really love this song, and just to see if
Yeah.
there was that would pique the interest again. But ultimately, if he did not want to anymore, I would honor that, as much as it would pain me to
Sure.
want to like see him, but I think when we let them have that natural interest, it comes from that place of passion where you really do want to do it. And that's where I think the most growth happens for anyone,
Oh,
especially
100%.
for
Yeah.
children. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, and there's also a school of thought where it's like, how do you teach determination and persistence, and
Discipline. Yeah.
resilience to like challenges and all those things? And I understand that. I mean, there was a fascinating study that was done when about kids. Two groups of kids were being given, I think, a test to take, and So they knew ahead of time that one was going to be, they took all the same tests, right? So
Okay.
they got the test. The results, the way that the results were delivered was one group received it, and the teacher said, you did fantastic, way to go, like you're so smart, you really aced this. And then the other group was, wow, I could tell that you really tried hard at this, and that was amazing, like you did all the work, and look at, the success that you had. And then they gave them a second test, and they let them choose which test they wanted to take. So one was an easy test, the other one was a more challenging test. And then of course the kids that were said, you're so smart, you did so great, they went for the easy test. And the kids that were told, you really applied yourself, I could see how much work you did towards this, they actually went for the harder test because they wanted to challenge themselves again.
Right.
And I think that when we apply that thought process to our kids, a lot of it has to do with how we present feedback to them. So if I had just said, you're an amazing piano player, and like you're just a natural at this, and he comes across a challenge where he feels like he's not doing well at it, that might turn the child off to say, I'd rather the easy gratification win versus, look, I can really press at anything and keep going. And so I think that plays some part in it, and I try to think about that with my kids with the piano situation. I let him lead, but I also reminded him of, how wonderful it sounds when he plays, but also I recognize how hard he tried, and so I think those things really make a difference, because then he was more willing to challenge himself a little bit more. And when we recognize the grit and the work that our kids do versus, the win itself, I think that makes a really big difference of our kids' willingness to try those things, and so that's something I consistently apply with my kids. But ultimately, I give them that freedom to choose. I mean, one of my kids does not want to cut his hair, and he looks like one of the Beatles right now, like with the shaggy hair, yeah, which is still really cute. I mean, ultimately his choice. But for a long time, it went against what I thought was like the typical look for a boy. We live in a town where there's a little bit of toxic masculinity, and so there's this fear of like, is my child going to get bullied because of the way he's wearing his hair, and like wanting to let him express himself, but also,
totally get it.
So but I've opted to let him express himself, and if he wants to grow his hair as long as he wants, then I'm going to let him do that. But I also am obviously going to teach him some skills to make sure that he can deal with criticism or even bullying, to make sure that he knows how to uphold his boundaries and things like that. So it's just a matter of creating some conscious awareness around how we let them express themselves in a safe way.
I agree. And I think that it's also part of, them making their choices on things that are not life-threatening. I mean, mine was the opposite way. My guy wanted a mohawk. I think he was only grade 1 or 2. And I was kind of horrified by the thought. Like, he wanted the full-on, not even the little bump. He wanted the full-on mohawk. And we had some deal, I can't even remember it, at the end of school in the summer, if you did blah, blah, I think if he got up every day without complaining, something like that, to go to school, he could get it. And so when I had to honor that, because I had said that, and when we walked out, all I felt was such judgment as a mother. My God, what is wrong with me? This is a 5-year-old, 6-year-old. He shouldn't be making those choices. And of course, he loved it. He loved the shock value. He loved all of that. And I cringed and I died. And it was really like, it's his fucking hair. Like, it's that is, let him have however he wants it. It's just his hair,
Right.
So I fully, those. And there's other ones where boundaries are like, no, you can't. Like, if you say he never wants, it's always in his face and he can't see and he has an accent, like that's what you deal with, right? But
right. Yeah, I had a mom who messaged me once, and she says, I want to respect my daughter's rights and boundaries, but I like, she needs to get a haircut, and I don't know how to get her to like say yes to this haircut.
Mm.
And I said, well, what's the reason for the haircut? Is it a health and safety thing? Is it a hygiene thing? Or is it your choice that you want her to have
Yeah.
this haircut?
Yeah.
And if it's your choice, then that really is not honoring her autonomy,
Oh,
unless it becomes a reason that,
God.
she has long hair, but she's not taking care of it, and it's a hygiene situation. And then you have a reason to justify this is why, if you want to keep your long hair, then these are the boundaries of hygiene
Yes.
that you have to, abide by.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's still her choice, right? But if
Yeah.
if she's not honoring that and it's causing a health and safety hygiene problem,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a
Yeah.
different conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
And what I love
we
about that, because that touches on so much of my belief that when you feel that you're in that battle, and I've had billions, obviously, now that mine are big, but you got to, the work is yours. Like, but you represent me. I want you to look nice and clean because then that makes me feel like I'm a good mom, right? And
right.
that's our work. That's got
Yes,
nothing to do with hair or their
exactly.
life, right?
Exactly. Yes.
I
Yes.
like that.
That's one of the biggest challenges that I think parents find when they start practicing consent parenting, because
Mm-hmm.
it is at the foundation about honoring our children's autonomy and not just saying your body belongs to you, but really honoring that, again, within health and safety boundaries, right?
Right,
But
right.
ultimately, if it's not a health and safety boundary issue, then we have to re-examine, like, what are our motives?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 God, I know it's hard work, hard work. So, how do you stay connected to yourself in all of this? And I think for me, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I'm thinking, especially in the work that you're doing, where you're in the real dark side of life, a lot of what's
Mm.
going on in life, many of us are oblivious. We don't live it day to day, right? Um, how are you able to, now you mentioned meditation, obviously, but to carve time out for yourself that you are able to be connected to you?
Hmm. Oh, well, um, I mean, I'm very big on having a support system. So I'm very grateful that my partner is one of those
Mm-hmm.
amazing support systems for me. And I have someone that I can really share anything with. And I think when we do work that is really heavy like this, you have
Mm-hmm.
to have those things in place. Um, Journaling is really powerful too. And also, I see a therapist regularly. I think that
Fantastic.
just having someone that I can verbally process with
Mm-hmm.
is really helpful, and who has given me additional tools. So things like
Mm-hmm.
even EFT tapping
Yeah.
has been really great, particularly if there's something that comes up where it's very triggering.
Mm-hmm.
I will use that to really help regulate my system. And breath work has been a really amazing technique as well. But also making sure that I have some kind of time for creative,
Okay.
whether that's photography, going out for a walk and taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
That I originally came from a background of photography, so
Okay.
anything that feels like creative work where I have an ability to have some alone time and some time to express myself through some kind of creative outlet is
Right.
really helpful also. And then also making time for laughter. So I love comedies. I love,
That's a good one.
finding ways to find laughter,
Mm-hmm.
find something that we can get joy from, that, counterbalances that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
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 Sorry, one second.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a problem at all. Not a problem.
Yeah, so just finding some kind of outlet. And if I can be totally frank,
Yeah.
also having other physical ways to let that energy out. So for me in particular, my partner and I have a wonderful love life, and so that is
Mm-hmm.
also very helpful as a way to be outside of like just the norm.
Thinking mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What do you think for you has been the hardest part of parenting?
There's a list.
Let's check them off.
Well, I think it was just learning how to, learning how to balance having that space for myself, because I grew up with a mother who was all sacrificing. She was like very martyr, like, where, I mean, to this day, her entire life is her children and her grandchildren. And I remember, before I had children, I actually didn't want children because I was afraid of the commitment that was going to require. And once I had them, obviously, you realize that obviously there is some sacrifice that needs to be made of your time. And I was okay with that. It was challenging because I consider myself to be a very creative person. So I love having quiet time, alone time. And so especially in the first few years, like, you just don't have that luxury.
No.
Unless you have like a super amazing support system. But even then, I mean, like, all you want to do is sleep when you can catch up on it. So I think it was, just being able to define a new version of myself, and figuring out the balance of, being a dedicated mother, but also being dedicated to the passions that I have. Because if I didn't have the ability to express those, I felt suffocated. And then I was like, I don't want to resent my kids. I don't want to resent my work. And so, it has always been continuously trying to find a way to integrate those things. And it's an ongoing challenge, but I think that's probably the thing that I hear that quite often from a lot of mothers, where, you want to have your professional life, but also your family life, and then you're balancing in your relationships and everything else that comes with it. So yeah, that's just been, yeah.
And I'm always so proud because you're so young and you've got young kids, that to find that I didn't find it till way later. I was caught in this whole, I need to be a good mother, and to be a good mother I need to be there. I didn't grow up with what you're saying, but I've married into a family where it is about sacrifice, and to be a good mom, you're always there and you give everything of yourself. And I was always in this juxtaposition of, but that doesn't feel like this is hot. And then I was angry, and then I was like, but this is what I wanted, but I can't stand them, and I can't stand being in a home, and I can't,
Yeah. I love the idea of being that, sort of ideal, almost like Betty Crocker mother. And I tried that for a really long time, but it was just too much of one thing, and it just didn't feel balanced. And it's similarly to you, my husband's mother was a stay-at-home mom, and she raised 5 children, and that was it. That's all she did. She was, and she to this day, and she's a wonderful woman, I have an amazing relationship with her, but to this day there's this undercurrent of guilt that I've felt, because I think to her, she's like, well, you have kids, like, that's all you should be doing. And she's never said that, but that's always been like how I've felt because of how she raised her kids. And
I had it the other way. I had it said, but not direct via my kids, right?
Yeah. So I think we all have some degree of that. I think all mothers have some degree of that, and society doesn't make it easier. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
100%,
so you just have to learn what that balance is for you, and not feel guilty about it. I think what has helped me to really bridge that gap is thinking about quality over quantity. When you're with your kids, being as present as you can be with your kids, not sitting with them while you're scrolling on your phone, but you're physically present, but you're not mentally present or emotionally present. And so carving out, I know that some people might cringe at this idea, but like actually scheduling in your family time. For us, a non-negotiable is dinner time. Dinner time is sacred. We all sit together. There are no devices. That's just our routine. And that feels, we can talk about the day and what happened, and there's great communication, and we focus on that. And that's helped me feel like this is a place of balance for us. So whatever that is and that looks like for you, everybody's families are going to be different, but being intentional with how we spend that time, so that we honor all of those different aspects of our life. We don't have to just be one thing or just the other.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the best pieces of advice I heard was, you need to be present with them, but you don't need to be present with them all the time. And actually, the being really present with them can be minutes of a connection, like you say, so you have your dinner table time, but there's also a time of just look in the eye as they put the pajamas on, hear about the day, like be present in those moments. Or they say, "Mommy, play with me." Maybe they only need a few minutes,
right?
But it is definite. I mean, we didn't have phones when I was raising mine, but but I can see the distraction now is so easy to just go on there. And so definitely, I love that. I love that. So let's finish with the final one, which we just sort of you're taking my questions. But this is, if you picture Rosalia, first baby, first time mom, what advice would you give yourself now?
Oh,
now.
Yeah, I say this to all moms. Accept help.
Oh,
Be open to accepting help. Don't try to be superwoman. It's
yes.
exhausting and
It's
it's
not
draining,
achievable.
and it
Yeah.
will not, it doesn't serve anyone. And I know that that's hard depending on who's giving the help, so I'm not saying just, accept a help from anyone. But be willing to even ask for it. If there is someone that you trust, ask them for help, because I can guarantee that they would be so happy to like be able to help in some way to empower your family and your children. So yeah, I would say
Fantastic.
either accept help or learn to ask for it.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Rosalia. Thank you for being here and for sharing this amazing wisdom. I'm excited to have our listeners and our viewers, have another view on what this parenting differently is, to be this catalyst for change. We can't keep doing that old way of parenting. We need to step it up, right?
I agree.
So thank you so much, and all of Rosalia's details will be here in the comments, in the posts here. And I really look forward to people hearing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.
Excellent.